I call that inclusion and care by design. So basically, the thing is, how do you look at all of your different processes through the lens of DEI and well-being to embed it into the different steps of every process, like by design. So, for instance, making sure that accessibility criteria for people with disabilities are part of your RFPs when you request a new vendor or a new platform or things like that.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the HR Leaders Podcast. In today's episode, I'm joined by Alban Jacquin, who's a Vice President of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion and Belonging at Schneider Electric. During the episode, Alban discusses how to bring DEI and wellbeing closer together, how Schneider Electric are having courageous conversations and tackling systemic biases, and how to measure progress in your company's culture beyond the numbers. As always, before we jump into the video, make sure you hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and follow on your favorite podcast platform. With that being said, let's jump in. Alban, welcome to the show. How are you?
I am fantastic. Thank you.
It's hard for you not to be. You? It's hard. Well, I was okay until you beat us at football. So I've been a bit upset since then. So I was gonna cancel this show with you, but I thought,
you actually did. You need some time to
process. I needed one more day. I needed just one more day just to get it out of my system, and then I thought, okay, well, we can do the show now. So
we're talking World Cup football, i.e. soccer, for the ones who might not understand.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, they're like, what are they talking about? Yeah, that's true. That's good context. I'm glad you provided context. But anyway, how have you been? How are you? How's the family?
Everything is good, thank you. We're getting ready for the end of the year holidays. My oldest son is coming back from college. My youngest is finishing his 6th grade. My parents are coming from France to visit me in the US. I have some great plans to line up with my girlfriend and the rest of the gang. So couldn't be better. And France is in the finals of the World Cup, so that's the cherry on the cake.
Oh, right. So you thought you'd just say that again, just so that, yeah. just to let everyone.
It's part of my mood and positive mental health, so I have to.
Yeah, that's a good reason. Yeah, that's a good reason. I know you've been doing a lot of work since we last spoke. There's a number of new projects you've been working on. What are you working on at the moment that you're most excited about? Share that with the audience.
So I took over the role of Head of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion and Wellbeing for Schneider Electric about a year ago now, almost day to day. And one of the big focus that I put this first year was to change the narrative. Schneider is a very well-recognized company when it comes to DEI and well-being. So I was fortunate to inherit a very, very good situation. One thing that I found in the benchmark that I did, the interviews that I did from people at the top level, people on the shop floor, etc., is that when people hear DEI, they hear gender, women, and KPI, like not quotas, but KPIs. So, and I wanted to change that in 2 dimensions. One, DEI is not only the gender quest. This journey is not over, but it's not only that. And second thing, there is a clear link between inclusion and well-being. There's no well-being without psychological safety, and there's no psychological safety without inclusion. So to answer your question on what I'm working on and I'm excited about, is to really change that narrative. So we went from 2 separate narratives, one on DEI, which was mostly policy and gender-driven, and one on well-being, which was separate, to a new ambition to become the most inclusive and caring company in the world. It's as simple as that.
I was about to say, is that it?
Very high ambition, because I really believe that if we want to be a winning company in the context of today, in a super polarized world, we have to be inclusive and inclusive of all, and it cannot go without being a caring organization, caring for each other, having caring leadership and caring processes, etc. So that's basically the whole journey that we embarked on. So and being the most inclusive and caring company in the world, and putting inclusion and care by design in all of our processes and behaviors. So
Well,
Easy to say.
I've got my title for the episode now: being the most inclusive and caring company in the world. There we go. The title for the podcast is finished. There's no pressure there.
No.
Where do you start? Like, you say something like such a huge ambition. Where did you and the team start, and why did you decide to start there?
So where do we start? We started with the voice of our employees. I am a big design thinking geek. So, and in design thinking, you always start by building an empathy map, by observing people, asking them open questions to understand where the problems lie, basically. So I went on what I call Get Real tour, interviewing most of our executive committee, HR leadership, but more so going to visit salespeople, people on the shop floor, people in the R&D centers, to understand what DEI and well-being meant to them. And then a lot of benchmarking as well with peers, with reading a lot of surveys, surrounded by the people in my team, the people who have DEI and well-being roles in the organization, to understand where also their main challenges were. And then we came up with this inclusion and care concept at the beginning, and I started to socialize it and kind of stuck. So here we are now, doing it 9 months after.
What was the main feedback that you got from your employees? And did it also reflect what you was hearing from the senior leadership team?
That's a very good question. First of all, is that there's no such thing as the employees and the leadership. It's not a monolith, right? Mm-hmm. So Schneider Electric is the leader in energy management and automation solutions to basically save the world, and by making energy more efficient in every type of infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And what I say that is because we are a tech company, but we also a blue collar company. It's like a 60-40. Mm-hmm. We have a bunch of mechanical engineer, software engineer, etc. But we also have a lot of workers. So their reality is very different. And even in the blue collars population, it's very different to be in a plant than to be in a logistics center. Especially from a well-being standpoint, the conditions are extremely different. So that was the number one big feedback, is that there is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all for DEI nor for well-being.
Love that. Yeah.
Then the second thing is take care of the basics. Like I think the feedback that I heard from everyone was what people want is good work conditions. They want a laptop that works. They want a little bit of flexibility, more or less depending on where they are. If they're on a global role, if they are in a plant, etc. Sure. They want that flexibility, and they want to be respected. That's pretty much the common ground. Then the difference maybe between the employees and the leadership. The leadership is more focused on achieving our objective. We have a couple of objectives, especially one in gender, which is 50, 40, 30, 50% of women in hiring, 40% of women in frontline managers, and 30% of women in leadership. So it was more about how do we get there? So a lot of the time, even though I wanted the discussion to be open, because we have objectives and we have data on that, it was 90% of the discussion was around gender and those KPIs. Mm-hmm. For employees, it was much broader than that. I'll give you just one example which was stuck with me. I was visiting a plant in near Nashville, Tennessee, and I had a roundtable with a couple of line workers, and one of them said, "Oh, for me, flexibility at work is if you make me come for an extra day of work on the weekend, make sure that you have all the parts for me to finish that day, because otherwise I'm going to be paid only for half a day and then go back home because the parts were in short supply." And because of the supply chain disruption, it was very difficult for the teams to have visibility on what parts will be available when. But for the employees, having yoga classes or perks in the benefits, etc., it's nice to have. But at the end of the day, what they wanted is to get paid for the work that they were doing, and making sure that when they come, the computer is working, the feedback is heard, and obviously the parts are there so that they can finish their work. So that's, for me, that was like wow, this is the spectrum of things that I have to work with. I have to work for people who have a global role, remote teams everywhere, who needs flexibility in different levels, but I also need to work for the people who need to make sure that basically the basics are taken care of. So
it's so interesting
of the task, but
yeah, it's so interesting to say that, right? Because we all focus on adding new tools like a new app or new well-being initiatives, etc. And sometimes it's the most simple things like that. Like we had our Future of Work Summit a few weeks ago, and one of the examples that the CHRO went to one of their logistics centers and said, "What's the one thing that we can do to improve your employee experience or help you?" And the person said, "We need water. We need you to add a water cooler because I'm doing hard work and it's tiring and I'm sweating and I need water." And she was like, of all the things that they thought they were going to get from those workers, they're like, we need a water cooler.
It's a pretty small investment to do. That's great.
Yeah. But sometimes it is.
That's exactly that. You know, I think on the well-being side, if you want to succeed, it's great to have like the best benefits you can. You have to be competitive, flexibility at work. A lot of people want that, and not only the new generations, etc. But it's really for me about the organization of work. Like I think Mind Gym, which is a partner that we work with a lot, which is a training organization. They have rebranded the well-being approach to well-working. So it's really how do you intertwine well-being and work. And this is not only about, again, all of those programs. It's about making sure that you really give the possibility for people to organize their unique life and work around work, that that when they have to say no to something, or they say there is too much, etc., they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel safe, that they can actually say these kind of things, and that the leadership is actually walking that talk and not saying, oh, yeah, I care for your well-being, but at the same time, here are those 17 priorities, and we have to do them all at the same time. So it's, if we don't manage better the basically the way we work, then all of the stuff that we can do on top of would just be nice to have, and can create more frustration than actually a positive result.
Mm-hmm. How do you, obviously with such a large organization with so many different, like you mentioned, you got different elements, you got the logistics center, you got the blue collar, you got the office workers. How did you identify how you make that happen across all those subgroups?
So two things. One, we have defined personas at the
okay,
level. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you have like a frontline manager, field employees or nomad employees, etc., etc. And that are common. So we have defined them together with marketing, internal comms, and other functions, so that we can address not only my scope issues, but all of the different issues to those personas. And second, if I'm being honest, today we work a lot with the operations, so the different regions, to understand what's different from the region. But we are still a bit too like a global policy, what the Americans call peanut butter approach, like everything the same for everyone. Mm-hmm. And we have to make those adjustments to be more on a menu base, so that it's more tailored to those different personas and also to the different culture, realities, etc. And don't get me wrong, we are a recognized player in DEI and Wellbeing today because we have done those things at the global level. And they had a very, very positive impact, for instance, on global family leave policy 4 years ago. And this year we came up with a new version. We have like global standards that are minimums that we say, hey, this is what you have to do. You cannot, do below that. And this is great because this is bringing everybody on the journey. Some take more time than others, but it's good. But what we realized as well doing that is that sometimes your global standards might be a little bit too Western centric. If I'm
for the local mindset,
yeah, exactly. So I think there's even more of this kind of bottom-up approach when you build the policies, and then flexibility on the way they implement it. I'll just give you one example. In the global family leave policy, we wanted to have pets included into the bereavement, which is, for me, it comes from a very nice sentiment. We should do that. But I have a colleague from Africa who was telling me, yeah, pets, we either milk them or kill them. So we don't need bereavement for pets. That's the kind of like a dystopia that you create when you have those global principles. So we have to be still very ambitious on where we want to go. And I think pet bereavement in a lot of countries should be part of our policy, but we should be clearer in what is the minimum like hygiene factors, standards for everyone, and what are the more like pick and choose stuff that you can take based on the reality of your culture.
Yeah. And there's no easy way to do that, right? It's hard work.
This is both the beauty of global corporations and roles, and that's what I love. I thrive in those kind of environments, and I love the diversity of those, the curiosity. I think it makes us like better, and it makes my job much more exciting, but it's also the headache that comes with it, because it's you have 150 different combinations, not to mention the persona dimension that adds to the complexity. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Well, then I suppose that leads down to working with each of those leaders and managers, right? Because they're your touch point, they're your direct connection to those employees. What's some of the projects and what you're doing around that to open up these conversations?
Yeah, so there's one thing that I started in this journey of changing the narrative towards inclusion and care, which I actually borrowed from Emmanuel Ako, who created these uncomfortable conversations with the Black men after the murder of George Floyd. And when I took the role, I knew I wanted to have uncomfortable conversations in the organization about topics that everybody talks about at the water cooler, but don't necessarily hear in the open, talked in public. So we did one in June around inclusion with OCHRO and another of our leaders. And we did one like very recently in November in the light of International Men's Day called Uncomfortable Conversations about ... men. And that got a lot of traction. We took as a basis an article published recently, I think in HBR or Forbes, about the fact that was titled like basically white men feel excluded from the DEI narrative of companies. Why should we care and what should we do about that? And we brought one of our executive committee member and an expert from the outside to have conversations about, hey, I am a middle-aged man. We have those like KPIs about women. I feel like I'm passed for promotions because of that. And I feel like we're only talking about underrepresented groups into our DEI policies. What about me? I am also part of that organization, etc. So I wanted to give a voice to this kind of dialogue. And that was uncomfortable.
Yeah, of course.
For me, for them. But I think it sent a positive message because we talked about those things in the open. 800 people were there.
800 people?
Yeah, which is
wow,
a good number. On mental health and well-being, we have around 1,000 people joining for webinars. And on people with disability, we did a webinar 2 weeks after. We had only 150. So 800 was a good number, but I think we should do more. And to the point we were mentioning earlier on touching people, all of the people in the organization and the complexity of the organization, I think those conversations will be even more powerful if they are done at the local level.
Yes.
And that's what I really want. Like if I'm thinking down the road, what will be the measuring stick of us being an inclusive and caring company? It's that we will be able to have those conversations naturally. Like,
of course, the stigma should exactly. It should be okay to have a conversation. And also giving, again, like you said, creating the psychological safety and also giving people the language that they can have a conversation.
Exactly.
As well. So they don't feel that way. Just out of interest, what was the structure of that webinar? Like, how did you,
So again, I had one member of the executive committee who is also part of our DEI board, which is an organ of governance we have to help us shape our DEI policies. So that was kind of the leadership sponsorship. Like, people were like, oh, that person is there. She's the head of our North America operations, a very well-respected leader in the company, and it's a woman, which was interesting. And then I had an external view. I wanted someone from the external to kind of bring the behavioral science behind that, more the almost the scientific aspect, so that if it gets too heated, then I have someone who can kind of be the pacifier. And I was the one moderating. And I had a couple of set questions for so that external panelist and our leader. But then after, it was really open to the employees. So anybody could
answer questions in the chat,
etc.
Okay.
And at some point, someone said, "Oh, we are like 15 minutes, 20 minutes in, and I feel like we are still not talking about the real issue, etc." So I called out on that person. I say, "Hey, I'm sorry you feel it's not uncomfortable enough. What do you want to talk about?" And his testimony was fantastic. He really talked about his personal journey and how he felt, and he was not the only one. And
what did he say? What did he say? What was he saying?
Said, well, first he said that he was not like dismissive of all DEI policies, etc. He even mentioned about the fact that one of his kids is gay and that he's super like inclusive, etc. So he really poured his heart out. But then he said, "I hear from my HR, from leaders that I cannot get that position because we need a woman. And how is it inclusive, right?" And that's a fair point. And so our leader, Annette Clayton, answered beautifully saying, "We have an ambition to be more inclusive and equitable, right? And today we are not. So yes, we're going to have ambitions and we're going to need to hire more women, which will make less chances for men. But at the same time, if I look at the promotion in the organization, it's still 70% men, 30% women. So we are not there yet. And the way you express the recruitment or promotion of employees goes a long way. So we shouldn't hear those kind of things of, "Oh, I took someone because she was a woman." That's not the point.
Sure.
The point is always to hire the best person. But at the same time, we're going to actually make more efforts to have diverse candidate slates so that we can give ourselves the opportunity to be more diverse and to build more innovative and performing team, because that's ultimately the goal, right? So, and it was a turning point into the whole uncomfortable conversation, because then people felt like, "Oh, we
now I can say this kind of thing
and talk about it in front of 800 people." So there was like a sigh of, "Oh, it can happen." And for me, this is a huge opening towards the company we want to be. So we'll have a next one probably on the age aspect, because it's a huge topic as well. The generational aspect, a bit like the woman-men thing. There's like a big push on early careers, but what about the others? And we have actually started a program on senior talents, what we call senior talents. So people who are more at the later stage of their career, to have more flexibility, more possibilities for them to give back or prepare their retirement in a much better way. But at the same time, we know that some people feel kind of left out of some of our transformations. So we want to talk about that in the open, and there'll probably be many more uncomfortable conversations. So that's one of the things that I'm very excited that we have done, because I kind of put myself out there, saying like, "Hey, I have a crazy idea, let's see and do it." And the response was really positive.
What was the response from the leaders that were involved in the meeting? That you mentioned, you're one of the leaders that was one of the moderators.
Yeah. So Annette Clayton is her name, and I cannot thank her enough for accepting that crazy challenge. And actually, she said she accepted because she had a similar conversation a few weeks before with one of her nephews that said, "Hey, I'm in that like company, and I feel like I've been passed for promotion because of women, etc." So it's that was very personal to her as well. But she was sold after that. She said, "Okay, so what's the next one? Like, how can I help, etc." So she's an ambassador now, and I heard it's funny because for those global employees calls, usually we don't have a lot of leaders joining. If I take mental health, International Women's Day, Pride, etc., it's usually what I call the believers that are coming. So in a way, it's great because we have a lot of participation. but you are not talking to the ones who either feel excluded or
Sure.
think that it's not even their own, that they shouldn't care, right? So, and on that one, we did a kind of demographic analysis, and we had 55% men and 45% women, which was interesting.
Yeah.
But we also had a good representation of managers versus non-managers, people from different business units, and some anecdotal feedback also of people who say, oh, I usually don't go to those webinars, but this one, because of the title, I was intrigued, and I'm really happy I did because X, Y, Z. And for me, that's really how we win. And we're not going to change the face of the earth with one webinar with 800 people. We have 120,000 people in Schneider, 50,000 are blue collars, etc. So now it's about how we go deeper to, again, to my point earlier, leave a legacy where you have that psychological safety everywhere to talk about.
Yeah. You made a good point there, though, about titles and language is so important, because so many of the times that we do these initiatives and people just don't connect with it. That's not for me. Just
Exactly.
the title alone is something you need to spend time and be intentional.
Yeah. So I stole that idea from Emmanuel Acco, but I come from a marketing background, and our chief marketing officer a few years back was a big fan of A/B testing, and he was testing the titles of ads. Like 50% of the target audience would get one title, 50% another, and see what's the better response. On that one, I actually wanted to do that, but we ended up not doing it. But the response on uncomfortable conversation was pretty good. I guess we're going to stick with that because
it works.
Had the intended effect.
There's also like a level of marketing psychology. There's intrigue there. You're not telling them what it is about. You're like, oh, okay, it leads you to want to know more. Just the title. That's great. Well, glad it went well, and I'm assuming people can people catch up on demand, like go and watch it after or not? Can they go?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we actually have a ripple effect because the chat is still active. That was like 3 weeks ago, and some people were still asking questions, reacting. Nice. I posted the demographics of the audience, which triggered another set of reactions. So trying to keep it alive until the next one.
Is that just through Teams then? Like what did you do it through? Yeah. And that allows you to have the data from who's there, where they're from, etc.
Exactly.
Nice. That's one of the powerful things about Teams that people don't really utilize.
Yeah, I like the social aspects, and I like the fact that indeed you can have the attendance. We used a word cloud at the beginning, actually, to ask people what did they think when they saw the title, which was
that's interesting. Yeah.
Some said uncomfortable, some said awkward. But I think the most thing was curious.
Yeah, exactly. Because the title, it's intrigue. You see the title, oh, I'm curious. That's what it should be, right? Whereas if you was binary about the title, people automatically opt themselves out and say, that's not for me as well. Absolutely. So it's a good lesson for people to learn when they're doing things like this. We spoke before about well-being and DE&I. Now you're on this journey. What is sort of the key of bringing these two areas closer together?
I call that inclusion and care by design. So basically, the thing is, how do you look at all of your different processes through the lens of DEI and well-being to embed it into the different steps of every process, like by design. So, for instance, making sure that accessibility criteria for people with disabilities are part of your RFPs when you request a new vendor or new platform or things like that. Just one concrete example to tell you, tell you what it is. And the idea around getting DEI and well-being closer together.
I like what you're saying, because obviously it's one thing doing it in the behaviors, but also you have to do it in all of the processes as well.
Yes. So you cannot change an organization just by having global webinars of uncomfortable conversation, however great they can be, right? This is not how it's works. So the bigger part of the journey is the by design thing. So how do you include DEI and well-being by design in your different processes? For instance, putting accessibility criteria into your RFPs for new vendors, for new platforms, to make sure that when people are doing the expense report or browsing the intranet or doing the performance review, whether they are blind or deaf, etc., it's going to actually be accessible to them. So we are starting that journey. We have started on a couple of processes in 2022, and we started with leadership processes. For instance, changing the representation criteria into leadership programs, or making sure that in all of the leadership programs there is a component around well-being and inclusion. To our discussion earlier on, you have to change the way you work, right? If you want to succeed in having a caring company, you have to start with those leadership programs, because otherwise it's, if all the leadership stuff are focused on behaviors of performance, of etc., but you never touch about those dimensions, then it seems like a nice to have an afterthought.
Yeah.
And the goal of the by design is to make sure that it's embedded into the culture, the behaviors, the processes.
And it's important because when you're having conversations, or those leaders are thinking about their own projects, their own initiatives, they can look at it through those lenses, because this isn't something that should sit just with you and the team. Each of those leaders and managers should be looking at it and saying, are we being inclusive when we're doing this?
Exactly.
And then that's really where you're going to have the bigger impact, right? If you're getting those leaders and managers to look at it through that lens. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. What are you most excited about moving forward as we move into next year? What are you most excited about? Apart from France winning the World Cup.
Yeah, that I have no control on. So. But so in order to succeed on that journey, we are reviewing some of the core HR processes through the DEI and Wellbeing lens. So performance and development, talent reviews, talent acquisition. So that I'm very excited about. How it's going to play out.
Yeah.
And how the partnership with those different functions will play out. Because it's a minimum number of processes, but they have a huge impact because they touch everyone in the company. And I think it just takes a couple of wins to then showcase them and then back the others. Second thing, we are planning a self-identification campaign. I cannot say I'm excited about it. I'm anxious in both meaning of the word, because it's a huge project, right? So we want to go to employees and ask them about who they are in a more holistic fashion than what we do. Self-ID is very common things that a lot of companies have done. When you're a global company, it's very, very difficult because you cannot use the same denominations for instance, race and ethnicity. In the US, it's a common thing. It's everywhere. In France, you cannot ask those data, nor in many other countries.
Legally, you can't even ask.
Yeah. So that's why the self-ID campaign is important, but you have to really well craft the why. Make sure that it's GDPR compliant, right? The Global Data Protection Regulation, and that it's tailored to whatever is the situation of each country. You don't ask the same questions in China, than in India, than in South Africa, etc.
Yeah.
So, but I think we have to have those data, because then we're going to be able to look at what we look at for gender and generations today, but for sexual orientation, origins, beliefs, disability status, etc., and see if there are some other patterns there. So I'm very, very excited about the outcome of that. And the last thing is I'm excited for more uncomfortable conversations. I think,
I just
around that. And
you're going to make a whole series, right? Like it'd be really interesting to see like that whole playlist in the future of uncomfortable conversations. Because let's be honest, like you said, whether you like it or not, these conversations are already happening with or without you.
Yes.
In the business, right? So rather you can ignore it, and like a lot of companies don't ask these questions because they're worried about the answers that they're going to get. But either way, they're happening whether you like it or not. So you may as well be involved in the conversations, show that you are truly listening and that you care, and then action upon it. And be honest where and where not you can do something as well, because
Yes.
you can't claim that you're going to solve everything at the same time.
Yeah.
Last question before we go. Now, I know you're still on the journey, but what advice would you give to leaders that are on this journey or just starting a similar journey to yourself? What advice would you give to them?
So, it's weird to give advice 1 year into a role, but humbly, what I could say is start by listening to the voice of your employees, and not just by employee engagement surveys, etc. Like go and talk to people, because I know that changed my perspective, and I have a couple of conversations. We talked about that example of a blue-collar worker in Nashville. I also met Black professionals in the Nashville area, and I can tell you this conversation will stay with me for life, like the testimonies, the vulnerability that they showed, etc. So I think you have to start there, especially when you're in a global role. It's very much more difficult to travel than it used to be. So you can easily be in your own reality, fed by the senior leadership, etc. So I encourage people to go out there and listen, ask candid questions. Don't shy away from the problems that you know are there. And I guess it depends a lot on the culture of the company. But I think if you really want to move the needle, you have to put the things that everybody is talking about in the open so that you control that narrative and you can fed from it. And the last thing I would say, start small, take a couple of topics, and then try to influence that, see what works. And in that endeavor, rely on data. I think the more data you have, the more granular you can be. Instead of, again, having the peanut butter approach, you can say, oh, maybe we have a bigger problem for, frontline managers in sales. Let's start there and let's see what we can change by design here, both from a process standpoint and from a behavior standpoint. See how that goes and then move forward. Because to our conversation earlier on global policies, they are necessary, but sometimes they can be misinterpreted and they cannot capture the reality of either a country, a specific function, etc. So if you can start small, based on data, I think you'll have a better chance to change the core of the engine, and not just the surface.
Love it. Well, considering you've been in the role for a year, it's been pretty amazing what you've been able to achieve. So congrats to you and the team on the work that you've done so far. I think one thing that, you said is in order to have courageous conversations, you also have to be courageous yourself as a DEI leader. As well, like you said, not shy away from the problems. As well, and it sounds like you're leaning into that, whether even into the unknown, right? As well. So, thank you for sharing. I appreciate you coming on the show.
No, thank you, Chris, for the invite, and I hope that was helpful.